Hi, my name is Michelle. I make videos about books that I have read. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know this is kind of a change of scenery as far as what I've been doing lately. I don't love doing that. I like it to all be the same. But it's nighttime and I had to make this video. I mean, what else was I gonna do? And I just can't do that with the lighting in my room. So, also I thought it was kind of appropriate with the tree for Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, baby! If you saw the first in this series, which I uploaded a little bit ago, then you'll know what this is about, but I'll just explain again in case you didn't. Pretty much, I'm just going through and reading Harry Potter again, really focusing on the differences between the movies and the books. I know the movies like the back of my freaking hand, and I like to say that I know the books that well, but that's not the facts. I read the books only one other time in adulthood, and that was listening to them, and I just wasn't listening that. You know, it was like fun Christmassy background music. It was in December of 2020, so it's just been a while since I've read them, and then also since I've really like sat down and like been with them. I'm not sure that I've read, beside that time, I'm not sure that I've read them after the last movie came out. So anyway, this is just me going through and kind of trying to remind myself of the differences between the movies and the books. What happened in the books that didn't happen in the movies that I've kind of forgotten about. I mean, there's some huge things that everybody knows, you know. If you've read the books even once, you'll know it, but some of that smaller stuff I just want to know. I'm also trying my hardest to kind of separate them as far as characters go. There are some characters that are not like super accurate in the movies, and I just want to like do my best to like remember them as they were in the books, namely Ron, but honestly all three of the mains. I'm just going through, that was a long explanation to say, I'm just going through and I'm going to kind of talk about some of the differences that I noticed in today, the second book. It's my first time really trying to kind of notate on my Kindle, and I generally don't, I'm not a notator. I'm just kind of going through it and doing it for Harry Potter, but I'm really liking it. It's very easy to use, even though typing is like so annoying on the Kindle. It's like every single word that I type is spelled wrong. So just getting right into it. My first is from page 39, and this is from when Harry is at the Weasley's house. He went there via car with them. They took him from the Dursley's house, and they're going to go to Diagon Alley via Floo powder. This is something that kind of frustrated me in the movies, that he says Diagon Alley, and they're like, what did he say? Diagon Alley. And you're thinking, is Harry dumb? Like, does he not know what Diagon Alley is? Like, he went there last year. They talk about it all the time. It's like the place. So that kind of frustrated me. So let me read you what happened in the book. They're kind of listing off like all the things that he shouldn't do when he's going through Floo powder, because he's like kind of nervous. They're making him more nervous. Don't fidget, said Ron, or you might well fall out of the wrong fireplace. But don't panic and get out too early. Wait until you see Fred and George. Trying hard to bear all this in mind, Harry took a pinch of the Floo powder and walked to the edge of the fire. He took a deep breath, scattered the powder into the flames, and stepped forward. The fire felt like a warm breeze. He opened his mouth and immediately swallowed a lot of hot ash. Diagon Alley, he coughed. So that's what happened. So he went to Knockturn Alley, as we know. And the interesting thing that's different than the movie is that when he goes to Borgin and Burke, he gets through the fireplace of Borgin and Burke's, and almost immediately Draco Malfoy and Lucius Malfoy walk in, and he hides in a cabinet, maybe the Vanishing Cabinet. He hides in a cabinet and he overhears a pretty long conversation between them. One of the interesting things is that they start talking about Harry. Well, Draco brings it up. He's like, I thought you were going to buy me a gift, father. And he's like, I said to buy you a broom. And he's like, well, it doesn't matter because Harry Potter is a seeker. And like, what does it matter if I get a broom? Because I can't even be on the team. Or I'm not even on the team yet. This is second year, so he can, but I'm not even on the team yet. And Harry Potter with his broom and his... he like goes on and on. What did he say? Harry Potter got a Nimbus 2000 last year. Special permission from Dumbledore so he could play for Gryffindor. He's not even that good. It's just because he's famous. Famous for having a stupid scar on his forehead. Malfoy bent down to examine a shelf full of skulls. Everyone thinks he's so smart. Wonderful Potter with his scar and his broomstick. "You have told me this at least a dozen times already," said Mr. Malfoy with a quelling look at his son. "And I would remind you that it is not prudent to appear less than fond of Harry Potter, not when most of our kind regard him as the hero who made the Dark Lord disappear." Okay, so it's funny that Draco's talking about Harry, and then also he's been talking about him like all summer long. And then it's interesting that Mr. Malfoy is like, you need to appear like you like Harry Potter. Because that's what our kind loves Harry Potter. And by our kind, he means the wizards love Harry Potter, so you need to be loving him too. I thought that was so interesting. And I will be talking about this more, but the difference in Mr. Malfoy was very surprising to me. Some stuff that I didn't remember was very surprising to me, separate from the movie. And then this is also funny. It's the kind of rivalry. Well, I don't know if funny is the right word. The kind of rivalry between Mr. Weasley and Mr. Malfoy. And when Harry gets back to the Weasleys, he's going into Gringotts, and he says to Ron, "Guess who I saw in Borgin and Burkes?" Harry asked Ron and Hermione as they climbed the Gringotts steps. "Malfoy and his father." "Did Lucius Malfoy buy something?" said Mr. Weasley sharply behind them. "No, he was selling. So he's worried," said Mr. Malfoy with a grim satisfaction. "Oh, I'd love to get Lucius Malfoy for something." That was another interesting thing, is that Lucius Malfoy was in Borgin and Burkes to sell something, and he said the ministry is getting more tight thanks to Mr. Weasley. So I can't be having these Muggle items that are, because Mr. Weasley works for the misuse of Muggle artifacts. So pretty much what his job is, if you don't know, he works with getting rid of Muggle artifacts from Muggles. Like, if Muggles have an issue, he goes to the Muggle, he takes that thing that has bewitched, and then he fixes their memory so they don't remember it, and he confiscates that thing. Well, another side of his job is taking those artifacts from wizarding families, so that they don't ever get into the Muggle world. And he's trying to start this act, Muggle Protection Act, I think it's called, to have a little bit more control over what wizards can do with Muggle artifacts. The Malfoys have a ton of old stuff, and he has to get rid of it because Mr. Malfoy is afraid of getting raided. And it was just funny to see kind of their little rivalry that they have going on. Well, speaking of going into Gringotts, they go into Gringotts and they have a little carpool down to each of their vaults. And here's an excerpt. "Harry enjoyed the breakneck journey down to the Weasleys' vault, but felt dreadful, far worse than he had in Knockturn Alley when it was opened. There was a very small pile of silver sickles inside, and just one gold galleon. Mrs. Weasley felt right into the corners before sweeping the whole lot into her bag." Not to mention, then they saw what was in his vault. But I know, the Weasleys don't have any money. They really do not have any money. They have no money. Next, another thing is that I think that Lockhart is so good in the movies. He is played so well, but his the things that are frustrating about him, they are even worse in the books. He's much more frustrating, and he is much more self-centered and everything. An example is in one of their first days of class, Harry is going to herbology class, and Lockhart is there, and Lockhart's like, "Let me take you aside so I can talk to you." And he goes, "Harry, Harry, Harry," completely nonplussed. Harry said nothing. "When I heard, well, of course, it was all my fault. Could have kicked myself." Harry had no idea what he was talking about. He was about to say so when Lockhart went on. "Don't know when I've been more shocked. Flying a car to Hogwarts. Well, of course, I knew at once why you'd done it. Stood out a mile. Harry, Harry, Harry." It was remarkable how he could show every one of his brilliant teeth, even when he wasn't smiling. "Gave you a taste for publicity, didn't I?" said Lockhart. "Gave you the bug. You got onto the first page of the paper with me, and you couldn't wait to do it again." "Oh, no, Professor. See, Harry, Harry, Harry," said Lockhart, reaching out and grasping his shoulder. "I understand. Natural to want a bit more once you've had the first taste, and I blame myself for giving you that. because it was bound to go to your head. But see here, young man, you can't start flying cars to try and get yourself noticed. Just calm down, all right? Plenty of time for all that when you're older. Yes, yes, I know what you're thinking. It's all right for him. He's an internationally famous wizard already. But when I was 12, I was just as much of a nobody as you are now. In fact, I'd say I was even more of a nobody. I mean, a few people have heard of you, haven't they? All that business with you must not be named. The infuriatingness, like the way he's just in his own bubble. He just does not know a single thing. It's so funny how he says, like, a few people know who you are, don't they? Like, he is absolutely infuriating. Like, everything that happened in the movie happened in the book with Lockhart, plus even more. Later in the book, Harry's having a conversation no, this isn't later, this is during the same class, I think. Having a conversation with some of the students during herbology, and one of them is Justin Finch Fletchley. And Justin Finch Fletchley says, my name is down for Eton, you know. I can't tell you how glad I am that I came here instead. Of course, Mother was slightly disappointed, but since I made her read Lockhart's books, I think she's begun to see how useful it'll be to have a fully trained wizard in the family. I'm pretty sure that he's Muggle-born, or maybe half-born, but I think Muggle-born. Just thought it was really interesting to mention, like, Muggle colleges and like a little bit more in the fact that he says, like, she thinks it'll be useful to have a fully trained wizard, as if there's like an option to be a not fully trained wizard. Like, in my opinion, I thought that, like, to be frank, that you're like kind of forced to go to Hogwarts because they can't have wizards like running around who've never gone to school, never been trained. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and that comes up later as well. Then we're getting to kind of a frustrating scene in the movie. This is one of the big scenes where I feel like Ron and Hermione were kind of wronged. Ron especially. This is the scene where they find out that the Slytherin team has gotten all new brooms from Mr. Malfoy, and that Draco Malfoy is the new Seeker. And Draco calls Hermione a mudblood. So I'm just going to kind of read a little bit. At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, said Hermione sharply. They got in on pure talent. The smug look on Malfoy's face flickered. Good burn, right? No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood, he spat. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad, because there was an instant uproar at his words. Flint had to dive in front of Malfoy to stop Fred and George jumping on him. Alicia shrieked, "How dare you!" And Ron plunged his hand into his robes, pulled out his wand, yelling, "You'll pay for that one, Malfoy," and pointed it furiously under Flint's arm at Malfoy's face. So I just love the rest of the team, like in uproar about that. Like, in the movie, it wasn't quite like that. Like, the only way that Harry knew it was bad is because of everybody's reaction to it. And Fred and George just being awesome. Once again, Fred and George are such huge characters in the books, and they are so great. And this is just one example of it. And so that was the first part where it was like, Ron got really upset, as we know. I mean, that happened in the movie too. And then the scene goes on. They go to Hagrid's. I'm not sure why. I think it was just to help with the slugs, with Ron's slugs. But I'll read in what the conversation at Hagrid's cabin. Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad because everyone went mad. It was bad, said Ron hoarsely, emerging over the tabletop, looking pale and sweaty. Malfoy called her a mudblood. Hagrid. So first of all, the first note is he's speaking through the slugs, through his like discomfort and pain to express he was very upset by this. He wasn't just like, I can't talk. That's the first note. Ron dived out of sight again as a fresh wave of slugs made their appearance. Hagrid looked outraged. He didn't, he growled at Hermione. He did, she said, but I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. This is the other side of it. How would she know? She's literally 12 years old. She's 13 or something. She is a reader of like history books and textbooks. It would be very unlikely that this would have come out in something that she's read so far in her life. You know, they're not talking about slurs in Hogwarts of history or like history of magic, in my opinion. They may be, but for, you know, third graders for grade 3, it just doesn't seem that likely that she would know what it was. And even if she read the word somewhere, she wouldn't understand like how the cultural connotation. I mean, she could hear from the word that it was like, that's like rude and that it's like disrespectful and discriminatory, but she wouldn't have known like, oh, like how bad this was. I just felt like it was really a disservice in the movies that Ron was like, blah, and Hermione was like, he called me a mudblood. It's a blah, blah, blah. And she explains it. It's like, okay. Ron continues on. It's about the most insulting thing he could think of, gasped Ron, coming back up. Mudblood's a really foul name for somebody who was Muggle-born. Non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think that they're better than everyone because of what they call pure blood. He gave a small burp and a single slug fell into his outstretched hand. He threw it into the basin and continued. I mean, the rest of us know it doesn't make any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pure blood and he can hardly stand a cauldron up the right way. And they haven't invented a spell our Hermione can't do, said Hagrid proudly, making Hermione go a brilliant shade of magenta. It's a disgusting thing to call someone, said Ron, wiping his sweaty brow with a shaking hand. Dirty blood, see, con blood. It's mad. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married Muggles, we would have died out, which is a good point. But it's just so much more powerful to hear this from Ron, who, and another note that like comes up more in this book, to hear from Ron, who is pure blood or full blood or whatever, and he is from a huge wizarding family, and the Weasleys like have influence, and they are a big family. In the movie, I feel like it's downplayed because of the famousness of Harry Potter. They just kind of like, the Weasleys are like, they're just a big family and they're like poor or whatever. No, they're a huge wizarding family. They have influence, they have power, they are all well educated, they're all smart, they all like go on to do big things, totally separate from Harry Potter. Just hearing about, like, in the movies they make it sound like Mr. Weasley's job is like whatever, like, ugh, it's kind of a low because they're so poor. But it's like, well, they're poor because they have so many kids. He is not working in a low position. It's a very important job. He has a lot of, and just hearing about this Muggle Protection Act that's in the book, that's kind of a big piece of the book, doesn't make its way into the movie. Kind of puts another piece in that puzzle of the Weasleys being an important family. And hearing this from Ron is so powerful because of that like influence that he has and because of his birth. I just felt that it was so sad that he didn't get that piece in the movies. And I mean, that just continues on as far as like other people taking his smart lines. But that is one of the worst cases of it. The scene as far as the Quidditch match where Lockhart gets rid of his bones, it's almost exactly the same, very funny as it is in the movie. But one difference is, through the thicket of legs around him, Harry spotted Fred and George Weasley wrestling the rogue bludger into a box. It was still putting up a terrific fight. Just a tiny little note about like another, like these little things mentioned about Fred and George are, they are so common. They happen so often, of like teachers mentioning Fred and George, other people mentioning Fred and George, Harry noticing something about Fred and George. They just like come up in the books so much. Harry is really close with them. They're on the team together, and like they are just a presence in the school in a way that was not so well put in the movies. Next, we're moving to the dueling club with Lockhart and Snape. And an interesting thing about that is, in the movie, Lockhart, to my memory, tries to put Ron and Harry together. And Snape says, pretty much, Ron's wand is broken. That's a bad idea. Why don't you take Draco? Well, in the book, Lockhart tried to put Neville and Justin Finch-Fletchley together, so it actually kind of makes more sense in the movie. He puts Neville and Justin Finch-Fletchley together, and here's what Snape says. "A bad idea, Professor Lockhart," said Snape, gliding over like a large and malevolent bat. "Longbottom causes devastation with the simplest of spells. We'll be sending what's left of Finch-Fletchley up to the hospital wing in a matchbox." Neville's round, pink face went pinker. "How about Malfoy and Potter?" said Snape with a twisted smile. So, the exact line that he said, they changed it out for Ron because his wand was broken. So it honestly makes more sense in the movie. And then he like doesn't change both of the players. He just changes one of the players in the movie. So he just randomly picks Malfoy and Potter, and they were not even in the conversation at all. So I thought that was kind of funny. Next is just like a little nitpicky thing from me. Something that bothers me in the movies is that when they do Polyjuice Potion and they change into another person, they still have their voice. I know one of the reasons they're probably doing this is so that, especially when it comes to one of the later movies, people are that act like they still have the original person's voice. Which doesn't make sense because, like, your voice is made of your anatomy. So, like, if somebody Polyjuice Potioned into you, they would have your voice. But they don't in the movie, I know. Probably for, like, confusion. But in the books, "Are you okay?" Goyle's low rasp of voice issued from his mouth. So, that's the T. I know that's kind of nitpicky. Next is later, they see that in the Ministry of Magic, Mr. Weasley... Yeah. "Your father now has an inquiry at work, and it's entirely your fault." He did have an inquiry, and here's what the Daily Prophet had to say about it. It kind of says some things. The car, blah blah blah. Here's a quote. "Weasley has brought the Ministry into dispute," Mr. Malfoy told our reporter. "He is clearly unfit to draw up our laws, and his ridiculous Muggle Protection Act should be scrapped immediately. It was even in the paper." Their rivalry is pretty big in this book, and I'm loving it. Then later, the kids get detention. Ron has to scrub with Filch by hand all of the trophies in the trophy room. When Harry gets the diary from the bathroom, he asks Ron about it, and Ron was like, "I know that name." And I'm thinking, yeah, it's freaking Voldemort, baby. No, he says, "I know that name. T.M. Riddle got an award for special services to the school 50 years ago. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, hilarious, diabolical, iconic that they left that trophy there. Voldemort's freaking service to the school trophy. But then, on like the next page, "He never wrote in it," said Harry, disappointed. "I wonder why someone wanted to flush it away," said Ron curiously. This is just a note before I say the next thing that was actually important. Harry noticed, and I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, Vauxhall Road, that the journal came from Vauxhall Road, and he says, "He must have been Muggle-born," said Harry thoughtfully, "to have bought a diary from Vauxhall Road." Little tidbits like this, they just make it seem so real. Nobody would have known this. Like, Ron would not have known this. I don't want to say nobody. Ron wouldn't have known this. Harry only knows this because he was raised by Muggles. It's just like an interesting little note. Plus, it's like absolutely iconic, once again, that Voldemort bought his diary from a Muggle store. That's all I have to say about that. Okay, so moving on to what was actually important, what I was going to say. Harry showed her T.M. Riddle's diary and told her the story of how they had found it to Hermione. "Ooh, it might have hidden powers," said Hermione enthusiastically, taking the diary and looking at it closely. "If it is, it's hiding them very well," said Ron. "Maybe it's shy. I don't know why you don't chuck it, Harry." "I wish I knew why someone did try to chuck it," said Harry. "I wouldn't mind knowing how Riddle got an award for special services at Hogwarts either." This is where I came to the conclusion, and they do confirm this later in the book, but this is my first time ever thinking about this and noticing this. Audiences of Harry Potter know within the second year of his school, second book, second movie, whatever, know that Voldemort was Tom Riddle. Well, Voldemort was at large for, 11 or so years before he killed Harry Potter's parents. So it's been 11 years, 12 years since then. So for 23 years or whatever, Voldemort has been being known as Voldemort, or He Who Must Not Be Named, or whatever. And so he's been around for 23 years. It's a very long time. But, so it never occurred to me that people would know that Voldemort was Tom Riddle. Because I'm like, how would Hermione not know this? But I don't even think it was in history books or anything. People did not know that Voldemort was Tom Riddle. They didn't know about his history at all. I mean, that's the way he wanted it. He didn't want anyone to know that he was, half-blood. So I just thought it was really interesting because it's like, to us, it's like, oh yeah, Voldemort is Tom Riddle, because we find out very early on in the series that he is. But that was not common knowledge. Nobody knew that until now, which was not until now. Until I'm assuming by the end of this book, most people know that information. Maybe not though, honestly. But to us, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But people have been knowing Voldemort for so long. Honestly, Voldemort is so old. But I don't think anyone knew about who he was before he came out as Voldemort. So that was a very interesting kind of discovery, I guess. And then another interesting thing. Okay, so we moved on. He went into the journal. He sees the the memory, Tom Riddle's memory. And in the movies, it seemed like Tom Riddle saw this girl died. Then the next thing he does pretty much is frame Hagrid. And you're pretty sure that he's framing him, but like kids who watch it don't know that he's framing him. When I was growing up, I thought that he really thought that Hagrid was which is so dumb because he, anyway, he frames Hagrid for being the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets, and he thought that Aragog was the monster, and that he or Aragog had killed Moaning Myrtle. That's what kind of happens in the movies. In the books, we see a whole separate part of this at the beginning where Tom Riddle goes to Dippet, the headmaster, and he asks him if he can stay for the summer. And the headmaster's like, I can't let you do that because of all these attacks that have been happening. Like, it just wouldn't be safe. And Tom Riddle is like, you don't say. All those attacks are the only thing from stopping you from from letting me stay during the summer so I don't have to go to my muggle orphanage. So he goes straight to Hagrid and frames him right away. For the purpose of, the attacks just wouldn't just stop, but they would know that the perp had been caught. So not only would they stop, but they would know that there would be no more. So that Tom Riddle could stay during the summer. That was the whole reason why he framed Hagrid. And he kind of chose him randomly. He was like, there's this weird kid who loves animals. Okay, it would be easy to frame him. So that was the whole reason for that, which I had totally forgotten about that. Okay, so jumping forward quite a bit, Harry, this is the next thing of note to me, was they're in the Chamber of Secrets with Lockhart and Ron, and this is so stupid, but they see a snake's skin. He said, the creature that had shed it must have been 20 feet long at least. I said, 20 feet? Baby, that's not very long. Aren't there some real snakes that are like 20 feet long? So I had to kind of adjust and think about like, okay, the size of the snake was made by the movie, so let's adjust. I do think it was longer than 20 feet in the book though, because it explains some stuff that it does, and it seems much longer. Plus, it does happen just like in the movie where he stabs the roof of its mouth and it bites him in the arm. That's a pretty big, it could have been anywhere in the arm, honestly. But that's still a pretty big head. Next, he's talking with Tom Riddle, right? Or the memory of Tom Riddle. And it's so nicely done in the books as well. It's even a little bit more carried out in the books about how Harry sees Tom Riddle and he's like, oh, can you help me? Like, she's about to die. Help me. Like, I need your help. And Tom is just standing there and he's like, what are you doing? She's gonna die. Help me. And he does not, it takes him quite a while to get it. Like, he has such he's so innocent. He has such, a nice idea of everyone. He's like, oh, you're a human. Come help me. Like, this girl is dying. The next thing is, okay, so they get, everything is pretty much the same. As far as the fight. They get back to, just the school and with Ginny. And, of course, Mr. and Mrs. Weasley are there in Dumbledore's office. And they are beside themselves with worry, of course. Ginny, it was Mrs. Weasley who had been sitting crying in front of the fire. She leapt to her feet, closely followed by Mr. Weasley, and both of them flung themselves around their daughter. I love that. In the movies, it's like, who even cares? Their parents are like, away. Dumbledore confirms, very few people, this is after when he's talking to just Harry, very few people know that Lord Voldemort was once called Tom Riddle. And I wonder if even after this, there still is very few people who know. So as it is in the end of the books, at least the first two, Harry asks Dumbledore about 1 trillion questions. He's got so many questions for the man. And Dumbledore does his best. He really does answer a lot of the questions. But an interesting thing is that Harry is really concerned about the fact that the Sorting Hat told him that he could have been in Slytherin. And Dumbledore pretty much says, don't worry about it because you chose to be in Gryffindor. And, that counts for something. You probably would do good in Slytherin. Just, But you chose to be in Gryffindor. The values of Gryffindor are more important to you, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of puts Harry to rest a little bit. Or Harry says, people thought that I was Slytherin's heir because I can speak Parseltongue. Dumbledore says, you can speak Parseltongue, Harry, because Lord Voldemort, who is the last remaining descendant of Salazar Slytherin, can speak Parseltongue. Unless I'm much mistaken, he transferred some of his own powers to you the night he gave you that scar. It just makes me think of, I'm pretty sure at this point that Dumbledore knew. Next, Lucius comes in because, of course, they tried to sack, or they did, fire Dumbledore. And he's like so upset that Dumbledore's back. And Dumbledore's like, actually the other governors, they told me that you blackmailed them. Just a little light blackmail. So Lucius asks if he stopped the attacks. Dumbledore says, yeah, and guess who it was? It was Voldemort through this diary. And Lucius was like, how did that diary get here? And Dumbledore was like, well, I don't know. But it's a good thing that we saw the memories out of it, because Ginny Weasley might have been accused. And can you imagine how bad that would be if Ginny Weasley had been accused, because her father is in the Muggle Protection Act, and wouldn't it be insane if she had been killing Muggleborns at the school? I mean, that would have ruined him. And not to mention just like she's having a Muggle item that's been misused, as they say. So we're starting to see some pieces of the puzzle fit in. Malfoy is acting like he doesn't know what the heck is going on. Harry says, don't you want to know how Ginny got a hold of that diary, Mr. Malfoy? Lucius Malfoy rounded on him. How should I know how the stupid little girl got a hold of it, he said. Because you gave it to her, said Harry, in Flourish and Blots. You picked up her old Transfiguration book and you slipped the diary inside, didn't you? So he's finding things out. He's knowing things. Malfoy is like, ugh, speak to me. And he leaves. Harry asks Dumbledore, and this is absolutely iconic, can I give that diary back to Mr. Malfoy, please? Certainly, Harry. And I know he does this in movies too, but it's still so funny. Because doesn't he end up with this later? Anyway, it's just funny. Harry frees Dobby. And indeed, here's the scene. You've lost me, my servant boy, but Dobby shouted, you shall not harm Harry Potter. There's a loud bang and Mr. Malfoy was thrown backward. He did not indeed start the killing curse as he did in the movies. Every time I see that, I'm like, wait, are we serious here? We were in the movies, we were serious, but no, of course not. That did not happen in the books. I mean, he's not that dumb. If there's one thing Lucius Malfoy knows how to do, it's avoid Azkaban, yes. And the last thing of note is that we learned that Lucius Malfoy was sacked as one of the school governors. Which is convenient, because in the next book, then he's not able to work as fast as he would want to do with Buckbeak, right? Anyway, so something that I want to say, cause I already spoke about the Weasleys, which was one of the things I wanted to say, but that's done. I've just talked about them a lot. But the other thing I wanted to say is, in the movies, there's kind of this, because of the way that Lucius turns up in the beginning and gives her the book, and then in the end turns up again, and and is so upset about how things like didn't go his way or whatever. It's a little bit different in the book. It makes it seem like in the movie that he planned all of that. It makes it seem like he planned for this. He knew what the journal was. He planned for it to get to Hogwarts. He planned for, people to be killed. He planned for the Chamber of Secrets to be open. Planned for Voldemort to gain power from somebody and potentially come back. He planned for all of that. It looked like almost like this movie was like orchestrated by Lucius Malfoy. However, in the book, the way that all the scenes add up that have him in it, the way that we hear about their rivalry and everything. So the scene in Borgin and Burkes is so important because it sets the stage for him being like, I have a bunch of stuff in my house that I really need to get rid of and I shouldn't be having in my house. And he happened to have one of those things because he was trying to sell it to Borgin and Burkes, to Mr. Borgin. He sees an opportunity to frame Mr. Weasley, who he hates, in Flourish and Blots. He sees this opportunity, and honestly, this is so iconic of him. I mean, it's like diabolical. He's thinking to himself, here I have this cursed dark magic diary on my person. Here is Mr. Weasley's whole family. Mr. Weasley of the Muggle Protection Act. Mr. Weasley of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Department. Oh, I knew he was just tingling. He was just, it was so perfect. So he slipped it into Ginny's books. He's thinking, this dark artifact is going to absolutely ruin this family. It's likely that he just knew it was like a dark artifact, maybe having something to do with Voldemort. He probably did not know what it was. Certainly he didn't know that it was a Horcrux, first of all. I'm not suggesting he knew it was a Horcrux. I'm certain that he did not, or he would not have given it away. But just knowing what it was capable of, apart from that, why would he have given it away if he knew all of that? Yeah, Mr. Malfoy was using his rivalry that's continued on, and he was saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna get them. I'm gonna get them. And it didn't work out, and he was really upset about that. There is one thing that causes pause. Can Dobby see the future or something? Because Dobby says history is going to repeat itself. Pretty much he knows that the Chamber of Secrets will be opened. How did he know that? Did he know that because Mr. Malfoy was planning it? So I'm not really understanding quite that piece of it. Dobby? Because in my opinion, it was not planned. Like, it was not premeditated that Malfoy was like, I'm gonna put this in the Weasley or some student's bag. Oof, that doesn't make... I mean, if he was gonna put it in some student's bag, he should have put it in Malfoy's bag. But once again, this is just one example of the many times that the Malfoy parents absolutely do everything to protect their son. So anyway, that is the second Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. A little bit of movie versus book situation. What did you think? What are your favorite scenes from the book? I'd love to know. What are your favorite scenes from the movie? Here's mine. I didn't get rid of that banded banshee just by smiling at it. Here's my other one. Ronald Weasley! How dare you steal that car! Your father's now facing an inquiry at work, and it's entirely your fault! In the book, it went on and on and on and on. And I feel like I'm missing something even from the movie. Anyway, I hope you liked it. See you for Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban!